Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 70 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we are going to continue our divisional previews and move on over to the NFC East, where we will talk about some players to buy, sell, guys that are going to be sleepers and breakouts. So I have a rundown of all four teams, along with some division predictions and a division buy, a division sell, a division sleeper, and a division breakout. So before we jump into today's show, I want to remind everyone, as always, make sure you are following this podcast on your platform of choice. We are on everything out there: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So go make sure you are following along so you don't miss any future episodes. And find us on social media. We're on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Vcourt. And find our Facebook page, our YouTube channel. It's also at Dynasty War Room, And I'd be happy to interact with you, answer your questions, hear about things that you want to listen to on this show, and answer, of course, any questions about trades that you might have. And now, before we jump into the NFC East, I want to remind everyone to download Fast Draft. It's a new fantasy best ball draft app that is awesome. You can use code WARROOM to get a 100% deposit match up to $50. So sign up, use code WARROOM, deposit up to $50, and you will have whatever amount you deposited completely matched by Fast Draft. So you can get up to $100 to play with on all the different types of draft modes that they have. They have all sorts of new contests that are coming out all the time, so I would recommend you go check it out and use code WARROOM. All right, so moving into the NFC East, and we are recording this on Friday evening, July 18th. So we're a couple days earlier than normal. So hopefully no big breaking news happens that affects how this divisional preview would go. But assuming everything is kind of status quo, we'll start with the Dallas Cowboys, go in alphabetical order as we have been doing, and just kind of run through the offensive pieces, where they rank within Keep Trade Cut in terms of their trade value right now. And we'll start with quarterback, Dak Prescott, returning from injury. He's the QB 22, the 76th player overall on Keep Trade Cut. Joe Milton, his new backup, he is QB 36, which is quite high to me. I think that is a little bit crazy. But QB 36, number 249 overall, and he's the new backup there, coming over via trade. Javonte Williams is new in the backfield, along with Miles Sanders and Jaden Blue. So an entirely new running back room in Dallas. Javonte Williams is running back 46. Jaden Blue is running back 41. And Miles Sanders is running back 84. So pretty interesting dynamic within that group. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Wide receivers, of course, CeeDee Lamb. He's the wide receiver 4, the number 11 player overall. He is now joined by George Pickens, who comes over from Pittsburgh, wide receiver 28, number 85 overall. And Jalen Tolbert still in the room, along with Jonathan Mingo and a few others. Jalen Tolbert, to me, is probably the only other interesting receiver. And he's pretty far down the board. Wide receiver 113, 323 overall. So essentially free. I don't really think you need to worry about anybody past Tolbert in this wide receiver room. And then over at tight end, Jake Ferguson, the tight end 18, player number 139 overall. And then Luke Schoonmaker, tight end 44, is his backup. So this offense, to me, a couple different storylines. Number one is that the running backs are all a little bit interesting. So I personally like Javonte Williams out of this backfield. I like him the most in Dynasty. I certainly like him the most in redraft. I'm not a big Jaden Blue guy. I think he will certainly get some pass-catching work, but I don't envision him as being a 3-down guy, somebody that's really going to get a big workload. More of a change of pace type of player. I think it's going to be Javonte Williams that is the true starter. Miles Sanders will certainly rotate in here and there, and then Jaden Blue, the change of pace, pass catching in 2-minute drill, that sort of thing. Probably play some special teams. I think maybe some kick returner is a possibility for him. So I truly think this is a really good opportunity for Javonte Williams. I think he is a bargain right now in trades, in startups. I think the value has dropped so low that he is going to be pretty easy to acquire. You can probably get him for a third-round pick, and I think it's certainly worth a shot. Somebody has to run the ball for the Cowboys. It's not going to be entirely through the air with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, although the lack of production that we've seen from the running back room does indicate that this should be a very pass-heavy offense. So Dak Prescott, QB 22, I think, is, again, just like Javonte Williams, a really good buy candidate. Somebody that I think will be a worthwhile quarterback to have, especially in Superflex over the next handful of seasons, and he's relatively cheap to acquire. I'm not interested in Joe Milton, as I mentioned, but Dak Prescott, absolutely. That pairing with CeeDee Lamb is great. I think that Lamb, of course, should be dominant. He will be right up there within the top 5 receivers again. George Pickens should actually see some improvement, I think, in this offense after coming over from Pittsburgh. So I do think there is room for the two of them to both be very productive for fantasy. And then Jake Ferguson, if he stays healthy, can be a solid, capable tight end. I don't know that he's anything special. I wouldn't be excited to have him as a starter, but a solid backup in Dynasty or a bargain bin type of starter if you went hard at other positions. Certainly a capable player, even if he's not a great athlete. Luke Schoonmaker, if you want to toss him on your bench, you can, but I don't have a ton of interest there. But to me, the three guys really on this offense that I would be really excited about are, of course, CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, and then Javonte Williams is who I would prefer in that running back room. Even though Jaden Blue is the fresh, the hotness, the rookie coming in, I just don't see it. He's a day 3 pick. He's not projected to be a workhorse type of guy. I don't think he's somebody that for fantasy football is going to be all that special. And so that's why I would prefer to take my risk with Javonte Williams, who I think has the talent. We just need to see him stay healthy and get the opportunity. Moving on to the New York Giants, probably going to be the bottom feeders in this division. Russell Wilson takes over at quarterback. He's then a QB 34, player number 243 overall. Jameis Winston signed there as well in the offseason. He's QB 42. And then Jackson Dart, the first-round pick, comes in out of Ole Miss. He is QB 23 and the 93rd player overall. So, significantly higher, of course, for Jackson Dart compared to Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, as it should be. Tyrone Tracy, Cam Scatterbo, and Devin Singletary actually form what I think is a pretty nice backfield. That's a solid 1-2-3. Unfortunately, Devin Singletary's value is probably toast. I was a big fan of him on this show over the past couple of years until he got injured, and that opened the door for Tyrone Tracy. And Tracy is running back 33, player 144 overall, whereas Scatterbo comes in at running back 25, player number 121. So the market prefers Scatterbo right now. I don't think that is off by much. I think that's about how I would have it. I think they're actually both going to be solid fantasy assets. I think you're going to run into issues where you're never really going to know which one you can start, or at least you certainly won't at the beginning of the season. But, Tracy is going to be the pass catcher, and he's, a bit quicker than Scatterbo, but Scatterbo can be more of the, early down grinder, the goal line guy. It could work out to be a pretty nice backfield, and I like both players. At receiver, we all know how much I love Malik Neighbors. He is the wide receiver 3 and the number 7 overall player. Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt also in the room. Robinson is wide receiver 69, Slayton 106, and Hyatt 100. Slayton and Hyatt essentially free. Although I will note that Russell Wilson is a good deep ball thrower. And so for guys like Slayton and Hyatt, who I think excel in that type of role, you could get a couple nice, bombs every now and then throughout the season. Jalen Hyatt really hasn't done anything in his career yet after coming out of Tennessee. Darius Slayton has been known to have, a handful of successful, productive fantasy weeks from time to time. So certainly a worthwhile bench asset, somebody to toss on your bench. And Wan'Dale Robinson has been a steady, capable guy as well. Probably not someone you're counting on as a starter, but certainly as somebody to fill in on bye weeks, potentially as a flex, that sort of thing. And then Malik Neighbors, awesome. He is my wide receiver 3. In fact, he's pretty close to wide receiver 2 for me, behind Justin Jefferson. We might not see that this year given the quarterbacks there, but it's not going to shock me if Malik Neighbors is a top 5 overall wide receiver this year for fantasy and then takes over that number 2 role in startups next year. Coming in at tight end is Theo Johnson. He's tight end number 30 and number 206 overall. And so this offense, we talked about the running backs. I like the running back room. I like Malik Neighbors. A couple, shots in the dark there at the other wide receiver spots. But I do like Theo Johnson as well. Somebody has to be the number 2 target in the offense. It will almost for sure be Wan'Dale Robinson, and then probably the running back room will take over that third position. But Theo Johnson does have some room to fit into the offense. Russell Wilson is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones, and he's going to have some opportunities to throw the ball downfield. So I think Russell Wilson is a fine, third or fourth QB to have in a Superflex league. Jackson Dart is somebody that, if you have him on your roster, you're obviously just, that you're not going to have a player for this year. He's going to ride the bench. He's going to learn. He'll probably come in next year. Maybe he gets a game or two near the end of the season if things are out of hand. They're, out of the postseason mix. But I would fully expect Russell Wilson to get the opportunity to do what he can, try to get a playoff berth for this Giants team, even though it does seem a little bit unlikely. The crazier things have happened, and I do like some of the pieces in this offense for the Giants. All right, now the Philadelphia Eagles, they, of course, the Super Bowl defending champions, and they're led by Jalen Hurts. He is the QB 5 and the number 12 overall player. He's backed up by Tanner McKee and Kyle McCord, the rookie out of Syracuse and formerly of Ohio State. And it's a pretty solid quarterback room, really. Tanner McKee, I think, is the backup to own if you are looking to have a handcuff in case of injury in a Superflex league for Jalen Hurts. Saquon Barkley at running back, of course, he's the RB4 and number 28 player overall on Keep Trade Cut. Will Shipley, running back 69, and then A.J. Dillon also signed with the Eagles. And so those are the 3 players that probably will make up the running back room. Obviously, this is going to be all Saquon all the time. But if there is another injury, I would probably expect Will Shipley to be the number 2 that becomes the guy that you would want for fantasy purposes. I think we've kind of seen it from A.J. Dillon, that he's had opportunities in the past with Green Bay when Aaron Jones got hurt, and he just isn't capable of fully being, a starting running back. I just think he's lost, and I think his time has come and gone. He's more of a, early down goal line type of guy. He's not going to catch a lot of passes. I just don't think he's somebody that for fantasy is going to do you much good, even if Saquon were to go down. And then over at wide receiver, you have A.J. Brown, of course, the veteran, steady presence, wide receiver number 14, and 37 overall on Keep Trade Cut. Devonta Smith is wide receiver 19 and 58th overall. And then Jahan Dotson is in the Eagles wide receiver room, along with Johnny Wilson, Anais Smith, a bunch of guys that are not going to be fantasy relevant. So it's really a 2-man show at wide receiver. It's A.J. Brown, it's Devonta Smith. The 2 of them are about as steady as you can get. Both are really awesome fantasy assets to have. A.J. Brown starting to get a little bit up there in age, 28 years old. Smith a couple years younger. But Brown is the player that is certainly more of a red zone threat, more of a deep ball threat, and is the clear number 1 on this team, presuming he is healthy. We talked early in the offseason about how it could be a good time to sell A.J. Brown. And so if you're a team that is rebuilding, you're on the edge of a rebuild, you really, you're not a slam dunk contender. You really need to be a contending team, a top 4 team in your league to have A.J. Brown on your roster, in my opinion. Or at least, if you're 5 or 6, you can kind of make the case for it, but you have to be a solid playoff team. If you're in the middle of the pack, you're certainly on the rebuilding end at the bottom. Now is the time to trade away A.J. Brown while you can still get first-round picks, whether it's one and another player, high-level asset, whether it's 2 first-round picks, whatever it is that you're going to be able to try to get. Now is the time to try to make that move. Whereas Devonta Smith, I think you can hold on to sort of regardless of situation. But A.J. Brown, given the age situation, he is one of those bigger body receivers, will likely break down a little bit quicker, because of his size. So I think you're on the edge there with him, but you got a couple of really good seasons still with him. I would imagine you can get 2 really solid years out of A.J. Brown before he really falls off. Now at tight end, you have Dallas Goedert, tight end 23, player 161 overall. He's a fine tight end. He's a steady guy. If he's your number 2 in Dynasty, I think that's fine. Even a number 3, I think he's a good number 3 in Dynasty. He's not somebody I'm counting on to start. I think, it's kind of come and gone there. Maybe again in a pinch if you're really, really strong at other positions and you're just trying to have somebody that's a starter at the tight end position. Goddard would certainly fill into that role. Goddard really excels for fantasy when one of A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith are out. So there is some injury risk for each of those players, which keeps Dallas Goedert's value at least some sort of a steady position. Jalen Hurts just isn't the type of quarterback that can sustain a full 3-4, receiving, I'm trying to think of the right word here, but the depth isn't there. Jalen Hurts is not a quarterback that is going to support more than 2 fantasy relevant targets. I think that's what I'm trying to say. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, both going to be awesome. Saquon Barkley is going to get his in the passing game and of course in the running game. But Dallas Goedert then kind of becomes like the odd man out. He'll get a couple balls here and there. But it's really going to be the Brown and Smith show with Jalen Hurts. Jahan Dotson, if you want to toss him on your bench, it's fine. He's probably on a roster given, the fact that he was a first-round pick a few seasons ago. But it's again, there are 4 guys worth noting on this offense: Hurts, Barkley, Brown, and Smith. And everyone else is pretty much an afterthought. All right, so let's talk about the Washington Commanders, who are led by Jaden Daniels at quarterback, one of the most exciting players in the NFL, one of the most exciting players in Dynasty. He is going in the top 3 of startup drafts. I've seen him go number 1, number 2, and number 3, just kind of depending on how people value different players in your league. But it's pretty much a 3-man conversation between Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, and then Jamar Chase, in my opinion. Some people might throw Lamar Jackson in that conversation, but to me, Jaden Daniels is my number 2 overall player behind Josh Allen, and I certainly see the case for him to be number 1, especially if you're going for more of a younger build. Obviously the age is on his side. He's an explosive player. He runs the ball. Everything is kind of set up for success in Washington. And so obviously a huge fan of him. If you're able to nab him, he's going to be nearly impossible to trade for. And he's backed up by Marcus Mariota. So if you're a Daniels manager, find a way to get Marcus Mariota on your bench just in case of emergency. At running back, Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt are the 3 guys that I think are worth a mention for dynasty purposes. And Brian Robinson is running back 30 on Keep Trade Cut, 133 overall. Eckler is all the way down at running back 75 and 274 overall. And then Krosky-Merritt is running back 78. So really, I'm surprised that there's not more separation between Eckler and Krosky-Merritt, who was an undrafted free agent signing for Washington. Although he might have been a 7th round pick, but I swear he was it was one of the 2. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but 7th round pick or undrafted, he was in that range. And Austin Eckler was surprisingly decent for Washington last year. He was somebody that caught a lot of passes. He's the 2-minute drill guy. He still had some juice left after what looked like kind of the end of the road with the Chargers. And Brian Robinson is going to be the starter, right? He's going to be the first and second down guy. He's going to be the goal line back. He reminds me a lot of like a David Montgomery in terms of his fantasy value, but without the upside of the other running back missing time. Because if obviously Jahmyr Gibbs were to go down, then David Montgomery becomes a star. Whereas if Austin Eckler goes down, I really don't think it affects Brian Robinson that much. That's where somebody like Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt would certainly get some more snaps. Because Brian Robinson is just not a pass catcher, so it certainly does limit his upside. He's a very touchdown-dependent guy, but he's a steady enough player that I think he's a worthwhile running back 2, certainly running back 3. If you have to start him like I do in at least 1 or 2 leagues, you probably don't feel awesome about it, but it's not the end of the world. You likely have a pretty good situation at your other positions if you're left relying on Brian Robinson. So, but to me, he's the running back that I would want to have, of course, from this group. But Austin Eckler is a nice, really late round flyer in Dynasty. Somebody that if you just need a little bit, a little bit of depth, somebody for a bye week, I think Eckler can do that. And given his cost, I think he's really affordable. Now, wide receiver is also a pretty interesting spot for Washington because you got Terry McLaurin, who was obviously awesome last year. He was a top 10 receiver, but now he wants a new contract. There's a holdout situation. He's about to turn 30 years old. So it's a bit of a mess for Terry McLaurin. He's wide receiver 30, number 87 overall. The team added Deebo Samuel, who's wide receiver 57 and number 170 overall. And then there's Noah Brown. Jalen Lane is a rookie that I like a lot for Washington. He is wide receiver 92, and then Luke McCaffrey is still on the roster as well at wide receiver 97. With the wide receivers, I mentioned the contract situation with McLaurin. That certainly should give you some pause. Assuming they work a deal out, which is what I'm expecting, I think they will figure something out. It just might take a little bit longer than we'd all like. So we might miss some preseason games, some training camp, that sort of thing. But I would imagine they work some sort of deal out because they have the ability to do so while Jaden Daniels is on the rookie contract. So I'm not overly concerned there, but I would feel a touch uneasy until that contract is signed. And I would just try to have a backup plan in place if you have to go somewhere else for week 1. Deebo Samuel, I don't know that I have much interest in him from a fantasy perspective. We're going to talk about him later, but I just don't. I'm not that excited. I think he's past his prime. He relies on the run too much, which he could get some of in Washington, but he's not the clear number 1 passing option. He struggled with San Francisco last year. The injuries have been catching up to him. I just think we're probably at the end of the road for Deebo Samuel's fantasy value. I've kind of been out on him for a couple seasons now, and with every year that I tell you to sell, that decision continues to look better and better. Better to get out a little bit too early than too late on guys like this, in my opinion. And although at this point at wide receiver 57, you're probably not going to get an awesome return on a trade, but you can certainly still try to get someone based on the name value alone. You might be able to pull off something better than you think. So, look around, see what you can nab, put them on the trade block, see if anyone still wants to buy in, especially if there's a Jaden Daniels manager that's looking for a stack of some kind. Maybe you can get something solid. Maybe you can get a second-round pick. Maybe you can get a younger receiver or running back that might have some more time in the league. But that's where I would be looking with Deebo Samuel. At tight end, Zach Ertz, Ben Sinnott, John Bates is there as well. And unfortunately, Zach Ertz re-signed with Washington. So that keeps Ben Sinnott on the sideline for another season because this is going to be Zach Ertz in the starting role. He's tight end 38, number 234 overall. So he's old. He's an old veteran. He's in his mid-30s. But he was good last year. He was a solid, productive tight end, somebody that's a really nice bench stash in Dynasty that you can plug in with injuries, bye weeks, etc. Zach Ertz, I think, really fits that role well. And Ben Sinnott, I'm not giving up on him. He's tight end 22, player 159 overall. He's got the potential. He was a day 2 pick. And obviously, once he takes over as the starter eventually, he's going to have Jaden Daniels as his quarterback. But the problem for him is simply getting on the field. Zach Ertz, he's not going to top him this year. He's got to beat out John Bates, who still played a lot over Ben Sinnott last year. So it's not been an easy road. It's not going to be very easy this fall either. He's probably going to be somebody that we talk about a lot as a year 3 breakout, but I'm holding the horses on him for year 2. I think it's going to be more of the same, where, you really don't get anything for him in fantasy football, and you're just left hoping that he can get in the field as the starter in 2026. All right, so we have made it through our 4 divisional teams, a little bit quicker today, but the NFC East is pretty straightforward. I think, not a lot of big new names, It's, a lot of the same. We know the big-time players in this division. We know the Jalen Hurts, the A.J. Browns, Saquon, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, all those sorts of players. So a relatively straightforward division. But I do have a buy, a sell, a sleeper, and a breakout for the NFC East. And let's start with the buys. So I actually have 2 buys for the division. It's going to be Dak Prescott, Javonte Williams. I kind of hinted at it at the beginning of this show, but at QB 22 and running back 46, for 2 guys that are going to be relied upon to be, really important pieces of this Dallas offense, I think they're both being vastly underrated right now. They're both easily acquirable. I don't even know that you're going to have to give up a first-round pick to get Dak Prescott, which feels crazy because he's been such a good starting quarterback for Dynasty for a long time. But you might be able to get him for 2 seconds. You might be able to get him, you could certainly buy him with a first and probably get even a little bit more back. But the market is soft on Dak Prescott right now, and I think that you should be buying in. He's only 31. He's got probably a good 4 to 6 years left as a solid, capable fantasy asset, and at the most important position in Superflex fantasy football. So Dak Prescott, definitely a buy candidate. And then Javonte Williams. He is even more cheap than Dak Prescott by a considerable amount. Like I mentioned earlier, I think you can get him for a 3rd-round pick. You can probably get him tossed into another deal for some other player. And I'm willing to take that shot on the talent that if he gets the opportunity, which I think he will, he can be a very solid player this year in fantasy. My sell is going to be Deebo Samuel. So I, again, kind of mentioned it, but this is a player that I've been out on for a couple seasons. I'm still out, even though he's changed teams. You can capitalize on that. I think when guys change teams and they go to a different situation, people get excited about the possibility that they might be better. Most of the time, they're not. Certainly it does, there's an instance of that happening from other players now and then, but by and large, when old players change teams, it typically doesn't go very well. And so Deebo Samuel, I'm not excited. I'm not adding him. I certainly am not trading for him. I would be trying to pick up another asset. If I'm entering a rebuild, try to get a 2nd-round pick, trying to get a younger player, a rookie, something along those lines. Because I just don't think you're going to get anything that's all that productive for fantasy this year. Maybe you're talking at best case scenario, a wide receiver 3, which would be fine. But I would prefer to sell that with somebody of his name caliber where it's still going to carry some weight in trades. So find those people in your leagues that still care a lot about name value. See what you can get for Deebo. I think now is a great time to move off of him. My sleeper is going to be Washington Commanders wide receiver Jalen Lane. So it kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with the whole Deebo thing, because I think they're similar in some ways. Jalen Lane is a good athlete, somebody that can take handoffs, will thrive in the short passing game. Just a good athlete overall that I think will find a role with the Commanders. There's even a possibility he could take over the wide receiver 3 position on this team. Now, probably won't happen right away, but if by the end of the season he was the wide receiver 3 on Washington's roster, I'm not going to be shocked. He had really good combine numbers, so I'll take the shot on Jalen Lane as a sleeper. And my breakout, I'm going to go over to the New York Giants, the tight end position. Theo Johnson, young guy at Penn State, showed a lot of promise before getting injured, and he's back. He should be the starter, and I think he's going to be a solid, capable tight end, and this will be the year that he breaks out. Now we'll wrap this show up, as always, with our division predictions. And again, like I mentioned, with kind of the ease of getting through the rosters in this division, I think this is relatively easy to predict as well, but with one little twist. So the NFC East has not had a repeat division winner since 2004, when the Eagles won it several seasons in a row. Of course, had a couple trips to the Super Bowl. But since 2004, so 20 years, there has not been a repeat winner. Eagles won the division last year. If that logic were to carry over, that would mean they would not win the division this year. So I'm going to go with the Washington Commanders to win the NFC East division and get a home field playoff game. And I'll have the Eagles in second place, still making the playoffs, still a very good roster. But, they did lose some pieces, especially on defense. A little bit of that Super Bowl hangover going on in Philadelphia. And then we'll take Dallas in third and then New York in fourth. I do think that the Cowboys can fight for a playoff spot. I think they might surprise some people, but, there's the changes in the coaching staff, the lack of a solid running game, questions on defense. There's just a lot more questions than answers for the Cowboys. And so I don't think I could put them in the playoffs right now, but they should be more competitive in 2025 and enough to fight off the Giants to at least take third in the division. The Giants, there's not a ton to say. I think they're just, below average, kind of all the way around. They have some nice pieces, certainly some nice talent here and there. Malik Neighbors is a great player. They got a solid group of running backs. I have questions about the QB room, whether it's Russell Wilson, whether it's Jackson Dart. Receivers outside of Neighbors, I think, are certainly lacking. And then while I think Theo Johnson has a chance to break out, and he's my breakout pick for this division, it almost is more because of the lack of good receivers behind Malik Neighbors than it is about Theo Johnson. So it's almost more of, the volume should be there to support a breakout, but it's not going to necessarily be Theo Johnson creating the breakout because he's just that good. So that's kind of how I would characterize that. And I think New York is in for another rough season with no trip to the playoffs. So there you have it. There's our NFC East preview. We will be back next week with another episode where we break down, I believe we're moving on over to the NFC West, our final NFC division preview before moving on over to the AFC. So check back next week. Again, find us on social media and download Fast Draft and use code WARROOM to get a 100% deposit match up to $50 and go check out Fast Draft today. Thank you all very much for listening. My name is Andrew Valancourt. You've been listening to the Dynasty War Room Podcast.